Welcome back, everybody. We're going to head into a session now on solar and batteries, and I'm going to hand over to Jason Venning to host the session. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning. Can everyone hear my audio okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So look, thank you, and look, thanks to everyone attending the session today. We're talking about solar and batteries. So my name's Jason Venning. I'm the country manager for FIMER in Australia and New Zealand, and FIMER is a solar inverter and electric vehicle charger manufacturer. We're a family-owned company based in Italy. It's been around since the 1940s, and we do solar systems, solar inverters, I should say, for residential, commercial and utility scale options, as well as EV chargers. And for those of you in the previous session involving the Suho house, so FIMER supplied the hybrid solar inverter and battery for the 10-star home. So this is a particularly relevant topic, solar and batteries. I mean, Australia continues to break its own records year on year for the amount of rooftop solar installed. So, you know, very much a relevant topic. I'm very lucky to be joined today by our four panelists. I have Emcee Court +1 and Brian Mollan, Howard Elston and Katherine Macmillan. So we'll start off by asking each of the panelists to introduce themselves and their particular projects and talking about their solar and batteries. So Emcee, may I start with you, please?
Oh, hi. Look, ours is Balthaig Farm. We're in Yarragon, Gippsland, which is about an hour and a half out of Melbourne. Our journey to Sustainable House Day has been a pretty long one. We are Melbourneites, born and bred, and we always wanted a bit more land to have a bit of a vegetable garden and sort of to build a house. And eventually, about 10 years ago, we found this block. It had, apart from the view, very little redeeming features as a piece of farmland. It was covered in weeds, had no fences, and lots of erosion. But a beautiful, as you can see, north-facing view. So this is where we decided to build our house, and it took us a while, but about 3 years ago we finished building, and we have managed to pack in as many sustainable features as we could. That was our mission, to kind of do that, even though we're on a budget. And one of those things is that we always wanted to have solar panels, and we're actually completely off grid. So the journey to that was when we got a quote to connect to the grid and found that was $65,000. So that because we're remote, we're a fair way off the road. So we were able to get our whole system for less than that. And I guess we've got so 10 kilowatts of solar and 30 kilowatts of lithium ion batteries. That's all managed by a Cellectronic inverter system. And we also have a backup diesel generator. But other than that, we're a fully electric house. We run heat pump underfloor heating, hydronic heating, and solar hot water, electric cooking, and
stove.
We do have a wood-fired stove in the winter. Has a wetback, but yeah. So I guess it's been a big learning curve, learning to live off the grid. But I think, you know, we're not hippies in any way, and we've managed to do it. And have a fairly, you know, modern house where we don't have to give up much. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic, Emcee. So the both of you look like you're the poster children for the escape to the country experience, by the sounds of it, which is fantastic. So thanks, Emcee. So Brian, may I turn to you to give us a bit of an intro on your home, please? Just
okay, get the mic going.
That's
All
okay.
right, Jason, thank you. Yeah, my sustainable journey started way back in 2008 when I was focused on reducing my reliance on fossil fuel for energy and personal transport. The video Runs on Sun covers some of that journey. 2010 saw the completion of installation of a 5.5 kilowatt solar PV system on the house roof connected to the grid. As at the 1st of September this year, the system had net exported in excess of 31,000 kilowatt hours of renewable sourced electricity to the grid. Thanks to the federal, state and energy retailer rebates, the system has now recovered its original cost, i.e. over 10 years. During this time, the system has also provided the house and transport with free electricity or energy. Whilst the original rebate scheme have now stopped, the cost of comparable system today is less than 10% of my original outlay. In 2014, a hybrid off-grid system of 5.8 kilowatts was added to the garage roof with a 22 kilowatt hour battery system. Whilst it was not my aim to completely go off-grid, I wanted to develop as much energy independence as I could, only drawing from the grid as a last resort. And I'm interested in Emily's 30 kilowatt hours because I suspected that that gets closer to total freedom. Again, I'd like an Tesla battery of 60 kilowatt hours to be totally safe. Along the way, I developed an increasing interest in other renewable, sustainable factors with two major objectives. The first was to reduce expenditure, save money with retirement and pension age coming up. It's now come and gone. And the second was to reduce the household carbon output footprint significantly. Today, the journey continues.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like you were quite an early adopter. So, you know, that's fantastic. You've been on this journey for a while, and certainly you can see, yes, the cost has come down significantly over time, which is hopefully will definitely help in the spread of solar and batteries more widely. So thank you, Brian. Howard, may I turn to you, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Green Home Build is a new 2-bedroom house in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. When we started on this project, we wanted to basically use best practice in sustainability for the design of the house, the way it was constructed, and also the way of living in the house. And I think our energy consumption is a good example of that philosophy in practice. So in terms of the design, it's a passive solar house. It achieved an 8.2 star rating, which means we don't need very much energy at all for heating and cooling. And then for the construction, our builder likes to say it was actually built with sunshine because we used a small off-grid solar panel and battery system to provide electricity for the power tools that were used by the builder. So that was a real positive from that perspective. In terms of living in the house, we went all electric and packed it with high efficiency devices. So our power demand is quite low, and most electricity we get from our solar panels plus a battery system. That provides all the energy we need for the house, plus charging our electric vehicle. So essentially our grid demand is very, very low. I quite enjoy having my own little renewable power station, so I get a lot of fun out of running a solar panel and battery system. And in general, it's been a really positive addition to the house. So I'm really looking forward today to sharing that experience with all our attendees.
No, that's great. Thanks very much, Howard. And lastly, Katherine.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me. My name is Katherine. I live in Kinglake West, which is approximately 50 kilometres north of Melbourne. My house was built in 1989 and it was very fortunate to survive the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires before I bought it, which is nearly 6 years ago now. It's a beautiful area, but the electricity reliability is notoriously bad. The frequency and duration of blackouts after I moved in was a huge problem for me. Adding to this, my street is surrounded by a national park, so I'm very concerned about climate change, the effects of which have been very obvious over my lifetime, even during the relatively short period I've been living in this house. So I wanted to do something about it. And just over a year ago, I had a solar and battery system installed in order to become as self-sufficient as possible with renewables, so electricity, and to ensure that my house had power, even if the grid went down. The biggest issue I faced during the process was in the design of the system, making it big enough to have that self-sufficiency I wanted, but having it able to be connected to the grid under AusNet's inverter limits. So I was a little bit unaware of what I was doing at first, and I have since found that I've jumped into a wormhole. To make use of the extra free electricity I was producing, I purchased a plug-in hybrid vehicle, and now I'm considering how I'm going to upgrade my system to accommodate a full electric vehicle. So I'll warn everyone, once you take the first step, it's sort of hard to stop.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Katherine. So, I mean, a lot of different types of systems there. I'll kick off with a question before we go to the questions. For those of you participating, if you do have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A window, which you can find the button for that down the bottom of your Zoom screen. So use that for questions, please, and we'll try and get to as many as we can during the session. The chat window is there, basically, if you just want to make general comments, or perhaps you can have an interaction with the other attendees, which would be fantastic. So I'll kick off with a question. Now, this is an interesting area. I mean, a lot of people come to solar and battery from a base of very little knowledge. So I'm keen to hear from each of the panelists. How did you choose and design the components of your solar and battery system? How did you go about that? What was your journey there? Maybe Emily, we could start with you.
I forgot I was muted, sorry. Look, it's a really long journey, and we made a few mistakes along the way. Look, I guess when designing a system, choosing the right people to help you is really, really important. And we didn't initially. We now have some really good people, because for us being off-grid, we don't have the support of the grid connection if something goes wrong. So, and when it does go wrong, it's always at 5:30 on a Friday night. I don't know why, that's just always when it goes wrong. So we had people in Melbourne who would then get back to us on Monday. And I think, for us, the first year of working out how to do that, and we're lucky because we had lithium-ion batteries, we were able to add to them when we figured out that we didn't have enough. And we did have to replace our generator the first year as well because it wasn't big enough. So understanding, specifically with a new build, because you don't know how much power it's going to use before, and you don't, if you're in a house that's already been built, you can kind of see from your own bills and things like that. But because we hadn't, we'd never used hydronic heating, we didn't know how much that pulled or anything like that. So it was very much trial and error. But, sort of 3 years in, I think we've got it pretty well.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, understanding your demand is one of the key things to making sure you're getting the right system and the right components. So fantastic that you got there. But yes, it would have been quite a challenge to work out for a new build, that's for sure. Howard, what was your process?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Emily in terms of having good people to support you, because you can do a lot of research, but you do need the technical assistance from somebody who knows what they're talking about. So we're very lucky. The electrician that our builder uses, he does the complete package. So having the house wired by the same person who's putting the solar system and the battery in means he's got a very good understanding of the entire load on the system and can advise us on how to put that package together. In terms of designing it, I suppose we just looked at the roof area and thought, okay, how many panels can we put up there? And that's really where the 8 kilowatt came from. And just some quick back of the envelope calculation said that should be fine for most of the year. And then the battery size was determined by what was available on the market that fitted with the inverter. And then after that, everything seemed to be about the right size, and off we went.
Okay. Katherine?
Yeah, I guess the design of my system is because I wanted the blackout protection, I had to look at energy production in winter. So I knew the system was always going to produce too much in summer. So it was looking at the production in winter. And then, the issues were having a big enough system to cope with a Melbourne, well, even worse than Melbourne winter, that would cope that I could run my house even barely if the grid was down for several days. And unfortunately, through that process, ran into a lot of problems with AusNet, who's our distributor. They have a lot of restrictions on what goes on behind the meter, which I don't think is really that fair. But luckily I was working with a company called Off Grid Energy Australia, and they put quite a few options about how to get around that. And eventually I ended up with this system that I've got that actually works very well.
Okay, fantastic. And Brian?
Way back in 2008, my focus was on transport that didn't use fossil fuels. Bear in mind, back then there were no commercially available electric cars, but I found an all-electric battery-operated motorbike. So I then went to see how can I power that with renewables, and the smallest available system, practical system, was 1.7 kilowatts, which I installed. So the bike has done all its running on renewables. And the whole journey went on from there, which I won't amplify now, but part of it is in the video.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got a bunch of questions. So let's make a start of those. So Emily, one for yourself. This is a very good question. How does your solar perform in winter? Do you need to use the generator very often?
So yeah, because we have quite a big system, it does perform in winter, and that's obviously when we have our biggest draw, because we've got electric heating as well. We do have to run the generator in winter, and I think even with a really, like even with something twice the size, there'd be the odd occasion where you need to run it. And our generator's fully automated. It comes on when it needs to, it does its thing. So we would be roughly putting in maybe 20 litres of diesel every couple of weeks in the winter. But that's on the weeks when it's really overcast. It doesn't need to be warm for the solar to work. It just needs to be sunny, and get a lot of sun here.
Okay. So another question here. This seems to be directed at you, Howard. What was the name of the system you used to generate power during the build? I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we used a company called Outback Power, and just a couple of, there were 4 standard Canadian solar panels, and just used the Outback Power inverter, and that hooked up to a couple of small gel polymer batteries that we used. So I think it's a fairly standard design that's off the shelf. So it's just assembled.
Okay. And Katherine, a question for you. What brand and size are your individual batteries in your energy storage system? From Ian.
Okay, it's just over 20 kilowatt hours. It's a BYD system. It is modular. I don't know if there's 5 in each cabinet. I don't look too much, but yeah, just over 20 kilowatt hours.
Okay, thank you. Now, some other questions here. Maybe Brian, I'll direct this one to you. You've certainly been on the renewable journey for a long time now. We've got someone here talking about looking for an off-grid sustainable weekender. We're wondering what would be the best cooking solution set up for an all-electric solar system with battery backup. We're conscious of how much power induction cooking takes. So how have you handled the appliances side of things with your system?
Well, again, being a retrofit, it's a question of transitioning, but my recommendation would be induction, certainly. It draws power, but it applies it very quickly. So it is very efficient, and it's got to be the way to go.
Okay.
I personally use an induction plate, a single induction plate, as much as I can.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's my experience too. We've got induction cooking with the and seeing how it works with our solar and battery system. I mean, it draws a large amount of energy at the start, but I mean, when it's actually running, it's not drawing a huge amount of energy while it's actually operating. So it seems to be quite efficient. Now, Emily, another one for yourself. Is your off-grid system three-phase? I'll take a guess at yes, but please, what's your response to that?
Three-phase. No, I think, no, it's not three-phase. It's a single-phase.
Okay, single-phase. Okay. Okay. Now, some general, well, this is a very broad question here. Perhaps I can start with you, Howard. How long was your payoff period, or what's your estimate of your payoff period? Some people focus on this. I'm not necessarily sure it's the best way to judge the value of a solar and battery system, but Howard, please give me your response to that question.
Yeah, that's that comes up a lot. I think because I mean, we've got an LG Chem 9.8 kilowatt hour battery. It's a pretty impressive kit, but it does add to the cost of a solar system. So I'd roughly numbers, maybe 10 years on the whole thing. But again, see, the price of batteries is coming down. So I think it's one of these cases, the more people use them, the more the price drops. So the estimate of how quickly it pays back continues to drop. I know that's a common question people ask, but it certainly wasn't top of my mind when I did it. It was more about getting involved in this and perhaps being an early adopter to it. But I'd be guessing a decade.
Okay. And Katherine, I mean, is the payoff period, was that a major concern for you when you're putting your system together, or do you have some idea of what it would be for your setup?
It's never going to pay itself off. But look, in January this year, there was a bad storm that came through and power was out for about 40 hours. Previously, I would have had to have gone to work twice without having a shower because I've got water pumps.
Mm-hmm.
To run the house fully, to charge my car, where my neighbours weren't even having showers, you know, that's priceless to me. That's what I was after.
Okay. And Brian, what's your comment on that? Obviously, you've had your system for a while now.
Yeah, I did it, Jason, originally I did it for the planet as a tree hugger, but it has turned out to be for the pocket in the economics that have developed through the whole process. So it's for both. And I wasn't considering payback essentially when I started. It's a benefit that has arisen since. And for my off-grid or hybrid off-grid system, that wasn't something I considered at all. But when you look at what you're not paying in electricity bills, you've got to factor that in as well.
No, of course. I think, well, Emily, from what you're saying in your introduction, I mean, it's already paid itself off for you because you haven't had to pay a significant amount of more money to get mains connected. But I mean, do you have any other particular comment on payoff or any other aspect like that on your system?
Oh, look, we've been really, yeah, I guess, you know, our situation's different because of what we would have had to pay. So we were instantly ahead by putting it in. But, you know, being off the grid, it's an amazing amount of money that we've saved. I mean, our only bills are rates here. And so, yeah, I guess, you know, you do have to factor in the payoff with it, but there's also the feel good factor, as Brian was saying. It feels good to be sufficient.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely understand that. I mean, there's a lot of different motivations for people: saving money on electricity bills, environmental, energy security. I mean, so many different angles that are not necessarily related to the payoff of the system itself. So a general question, which is another interesting one, particularly for those starting from scratch with solar and battery. So Joe asked, where did you start to educate yourself on solar and battery knowledge? Was it websites, books, etc.? You know, other than obviously things like Renew Economy and those sorts of sites. So maybe, Katherine, I could start with you. How did you learn about what to choose?
Yeah, I guess it was a lot of research online. Look, I found the Solar Quotes website was really good for a lot of information. The quotes that they provided me probably weren't, but yeah, I found that was a good starting point, and you just launch it.
Okay, Howard?
Yeah, Solar Quotes is a good place just to get general information. So I use them as one of my sources. And I think the Renew magazine is another good one, because there's heaps of articles in there from people who've been there, done that. And it's a good source of inspiration and also hard information that helps you make decisions.
Okay. And Brian?
This is a funny one. Back in 2008, there's less information on the net, etc., etc. I happened to be a member of a bushfire brigade, and next door was the SES, and the bloke in the SES happened to know about solar. So that's how I went from there. And he's done everything for me ever since. It's been quality work. And being a mate, he knows he better not let me down.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, that's another strong source. I mean, word of mouth is another great way of people get information. And Emily, yourself?
Look, for us, I would really, I guess, encourage people to look at people in their local area and to talk to everybody. And people will tell you different things, contradicting things all the time. We were told we would never get off-grid with lithium-ion batteries when we first started this process. And we do, and lots of people do now. The technology is improving so dramatically all of the time and getting cheaper. So just, yeah, keep having the conversation with people and yeah, doing your research.
Okay. Another question from Jen about batteries. What is the lifespan of the batteries that have been used? So Howard, maybe start with yourself. Have you got batteries on your system?
Yeah, so we've got an LG Chem lithium battery on ours. So that's a newer technology. Well, I suppose it's guaranteed for 10 years or a certain number of cycles. So I'm expecting to get a few more years than that out of it.
And Katherine? Oh, sorry, we'll definitely get to you, Brian.
My batteries have a 10-year warranty, but given what I put them through, I expect to get longer than that from them.
Okay, I mean, just a related question, Katherine. I mean, what's your charge-discharge cycle? I mean, how many times would you charge-discharge your battery? Once a day, less than that, more than that?
Generally once a day, yep.
Okay, I mean, that's pretty much the standard that all these warranties seem to be based on. Brian, over to you.
Yeah, I've got a bit of experience with this. When I first started, again, financial constraints, I had another mate in trucks, and they use 24-volt system, two 12-volt batteries. When they have battery problems, they throw them both out. Usually one of those batteries is tolerable. So being generous, I offered to look after them and house them. And so I had a big bank of extra lead acid 12-volt batteries, but they didn't last more than about 18 months. They just not suitable. They're good for heavy cranking, but not long persistent load. So then I replaced them with a recommendation of gel batteries, but again, they didn't last more than a couple of years before they just swelled and became unusable. So unless you have huge numbers so that they're not working too hard, then lithium-ion is the way to go, or modern technology batteries. And I've had mine for 3 years now, and they're performing beautifully. They get topped up every day from solar, and if I get 3 days of overcast and not much solar generation, then I have to draw from the grid. But by and large, they do the job beautifully. Now, the other thing on battery costs is that bulk battery cells themselves, without inverters and things, you, Jason, would probably endorse this. The bulk battery for the cell price is about 230 Australian dollars per kilowatt hour. And what we're hoping to see is that with mass production, this will drop to around 130 kilowatt hours. Sorry, $130 per kilowatt hour. And that will transform and make it much easier for people to install batteries. Okay, thanks, Brian.
Emily, do you have anything to add to that question about payoff?
So our battery system has a warranty of I think it's 12 years or a certain amount of discharge hours. But look, with lithium ion, they haven't been around for long enough for anyone to have claimed on the batteries. We have our system set to look after the battery well within the parameters of that, and that's why we have the generator.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, there's just a couple of other questions that are related to that topic. I mean, if you base it, say, there's one about here with a 10-year payoff on the battery system, how long is the life of the battery system? Well, that's kind of like how long is a piece of string? I mean, in theory, a lithium-ion battery system, if it's used according to its recommendations and you know, maintained well, then the actual battery system should last much longer than 10 years. The main difference will be a reduced capacity. So the main thing with lithium ion is over time the capacity reduces. So after 10 years, on a good battery system, you might have 65 to 70% of your original capacity available. So your battery just won't suddenly stop working after 10 years. It could go indefinitely, but of course, but over time, definitely its capacity to store electricity will reduce, and just depends on the manufacturer and how they make it and the chemistry as to what that might be. So I think that covers a few general questions in the type there. Okay, here's a good question. Emily mentioned things that go wrong. Can everyone share their experiences of what goes wrong, the lessons you've learnt, and what you would recommend to avoid those? So quite a big topic there, but a great question. So Emily, maybe we can start with you on that one, please.
Look, I think with us, the first year was hard. The first winter was hard being off grid. We actually had the same installer for all of our heating and our electricity, and they weren't a good choice. The reason that we chose that is because we wanted someone who could build a system that would accommodate the fully electric house. And it didn't, and that was the biggest thing that went wrong. That and the fact that the generator we had initially was undersized, and the auto start didn't work 100% of the time. Because the generator was undersized when the system was pulling it on, it was sometimes dropping out, and it meant that we didn't have power. So that I think by managing to get good local people that are only a phone call away if something goes wrong, not that sort of touch wood that we've had anything go wrong lately, but yeah, it's definitely, and I think everybody that I've kind of spoken to who has off-grid systems says that there's a fair bit of tweaking in the first year. You go through a whole year cycle and you figure out what it can do in the summer and the winter, and it's different. And learning how to manage your appliances as well.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Howard, what about yourself? What was any horror stories in your experiences so far?
No, I think it's a bit like what Emily's saying. If you get the design right at the start, the system's been working really well. There's two things that came up when we were designing it, that inverters aren't inverters when it comes to battery systems, in that if you're relying on it like we are in our Melbourne suburb for backup, you've got to make sure the inverter can operate separately to the grid, and not all systems do. So I think you'll find people assume just because they've got a battery, when the lights go out in the street, they'll be fine. But unless you've got the right sort of system, you'll be taken out as well. So you're sitting there with a battery wondering, why am I not still getting electricity? So that was something that our electrician made sure we're aware of. And the other thing is just wiring your house to make sure that you've got certain backup circuits, and not everything's hooked up to the battery, because that will overload it. So you make some decisions early, and then you avoid problems later on, saying, okay, there are some circuits that are connected to the battery backup system, others won't be operating.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you make a great point there, Howard. I mean, for battery systems, one of the benefits is the possibility of providing emergency backup, but as you've correctly said, it's got to be set up and designed that way. It doesn't just happen out of the box. So it's a good point. Katherine.
Yeah, I haven't had too many problems. When it was installed, there was a little component, a tiny little component I was shown that was installed wrongly, which meant my DC couple panels weren't working. That was fixed very quickly. And after that, it's been pretty faultless. My biggest challenge has been over winter, when I don't generate enough electricity to meet my needs and charge the battery overnight from the grid. is trying to determine how much electricity I need, so I don't buy too much, but that I'll have enough spare if the grid goes down.
Okay, well that's interesting. How have you managed to work that out yet?
I've only had one winter, and sometimes I get it wrong, sometimes I manage it, sometimes I buy too much and I end up exporting electricity during the day. Other times I run out of battery and I'm running off the grid and just keeping my fingers crossed and hoping it stays up. So I think experience will help with that.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Katherine. Brian?
Apart from the batteries, which I've recounted, in the 10 years, the only problem I've had was the Fronius inverter for the Grid Connect system is actually 2 inverters, and they each have a PC board, and one PC board failed, and because I monitor my daily solar production, I noticed that I wasn't getting as much as I felt I should be getting. So then I called my guy, he came up, found PC board had failed, and put in another one, and she's been running good ever since. That is really my only problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Another general question here, which is an interesting one. So what level of maintenance is required to keep your systems running? So I know obviously they've got systems of different age here. So maybe Brian, you've got the system that's been in use for the longest probably. So what's the maintenance regime, if any, for your system?
0, apart from getting on the roof and washing down the panels from time to time. Otherwise, absolute 0.
Okay. Anyone else had to do any sort of maintenance or expecting to do any sort of maintenance, or is it pretty much set and forget? No, generally looks like it's pretty much maintenance free. Well, that's what you want, so that's fantastic. Whole bunch of questions here, a lot of different ones about battery technology. I think we've talked about, well, there are obviously different ones. Brian mentioned lead acid. Lithium ion is sort of the most common one you would find today. I hear a question about recycling. So quite a few questions about, are solar panels and batteries recyclable at the end of their life? Who recycles them? Obviously, this is a very broad question that we're still working on, but anyone on the panel have a comment or a scheme, or, idea about recycling of panels and batteries when they do reach the end of their life?
I did see an article saying that there is a recycling plant just been established, I think outside Melbourne, and I think with government funding. I don't have more details than that. And I am told that the lithium in batteries, with lithium batteries, about 80% is recyclable, recoverable.
Okay.
But whether we have that technology in Australia, I can't tell you.
Yes, I mean, it's evolving, and I think like recycling in general, a lot needs to be done to put the right incentives and frameworks in place to encourage recycling, but certainly it's something that needs to be looked at as these systems age over time.
But I did get some money back from my old lead acids. I took them down to a recycling joint and got some money off them, so they went a total loss.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, that's the benefit of quite a common technology. So yes, there'll definitely be a way to recycle those batteries, and hopefully lithium ion will be the same in the not too distant future. A question for Emily, if you have this information from Bill, what percentage of your power goes to heating?
I would say the majority of it goes to heating in the winter. Our heat pump is it's a 3.5 kilowatt heat pump. So that runs constantly 3.5 kilowatts. So that would be the majority of our load. We do have also a element that boosts our hot water, which is also a 3.5 kilowatt. So I try to have one coming on before the other to account for those really. So they're on timers. So to account for those really overcast days. Yeah. So, and then, you know, when you're cooking, there's obviously, we have an induction stove. So there's an amount of power that's taken for that, but it's only for a short period of time. So I guess that probably the majority of I probably would say maybe 2/3 of our power to 3/4 of our power in winter is taken up by heat. But because we're passive solar, sort of for about 8 months of the year, we don't run that.
Okay. So look, we're getting pretty close to the end of the session. Probably time to wrap up. So, I mean, look, it's a huge topic, solar and battery. There's so many moving parts. Sounds like all four of you have really embraced renewable solar and battery in a big way, and particularly some challenges living in an off-grid system. But obviously, Emily, you know, you have shown that it is possible, and in some cases, it just almost pays for itself before you've even got it installed, considering the cost of connecting to the grid. So great success story there. And obviously all of you have got different motivations for doing what you're doing, but it looks like you've really embraced it, and you've got some great systems there. So I just want to thank all of you for your time. It's been great having you on the panel. Thank you very much. And I wish you all the best and hope you continue to have good experiences with your solar and battery systems. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, the other panelists. Very interesting.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And thanks to Jason for moderating. Fantastic work. As we've said, we at Renew, we're running 3 different rooms today for Sustainable House Days. So this is actually room 3, but there's 30 different sessions going across the day. And if you go back to the SHD website, you can see all the different sessions coming up. We're going to have a session soon in about 5 minutes. Our second session for the day, starting on going all electric, which should be good. We're also running side events, extension events in the coming week on various topics, webinars again, Q&A sort of sessions. So please go back to the SHD website to check those out. And if you're not familiar with Renew as an organisation, we're a membership-based not-for-profit. We're a national organisation. We have about 11,000 members across the country, and we're all about providing independent, accurate information and advice on green technology and sustainable practices, run lots of events like this and do consumer advocacy and research projects. And yeah, check out our website too at renew.org.au.